Can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey. We got people.
Hey.
Good morning,
All
Scott and Phil
right.
and Christopher.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our latest installment of Facebook Live on MOUG. I am joined by my esteemed colleague, Isabel Wang. We appreciate you joining us today. I think Happy Taco Tuesday, everybody.
Where's the tacos? I didn't get tacos.
Yeah, we didn't get any, Jorge. Are they on the way? Alrighty. So one quick thing before we get started is next week we are taking the week off because Adam won't be here, and of course Facebook Live doesn't happen without Adam. And I know a lot of you are heading to Inman next week, so we will take 1 week off and we will be back the following week. We'll probably be back at the 9 o'clock time slot unless we hear a lot of people like this earlier time slot better, but we'll let you know either way what the time is going to be. The other thing is that Isabel is one of our best, most appreciated MSPs out there. She scans a lot. She's very knowledgeable. She owns a BLK. And so she's by far one of the most helpful on MOUG. So you can hit her up with any questions that you have. However, please remember that she does not work for Matterport. So she can't look at your spaces and help you with accounts and such stuff like that. So, but she is one of our best MSPs out there, and she's full. So definitely use her as a resource. Right, Isabel?
Thanks, Dee.
All righty, let's get started. I think that you set up a theme for this week's
I think there's been a lot of complaints that alignment is getting more difficult, that scans are showing up in the wrong places more often. Do you know if the algorithm for alignment has changed in Capture in the recent past?
Yeah, so I did speak with our engineers because I have noticed that too, and they assured me that nothing has changed on their end. However, the reality is that yes, I think our software has become a little bit more picky. I think that more people are having scans show up in the wrong location. If that happens, you should not ignore it. You should delete that scan, move closer to a prior scan, and redo the scan. So it means that when you're out there scanning, you have to be vigilant about where the next scans are placed. And you should be able to look on the mini map and it should tell you where it's at and you should know where it should go. And so just be very cautious about that. Another thing that can cause alignment issues is mirrors, right? So when a human sees a mirror, they know, okay, there's a mirror here. There's nothing behind that mirror. For example, if you're in a bathroom, we know, oh yeah, it's a mirror. The image in the mirror is just a reflection. The camera, however, thinks, oh, she's got two bathrooms. She's got one here and she's got one behind this mirror here. And when you go to scan behind that wall, usually there's like a living room or some other, if it's an interior window mirror, there's another room back there. When you go back there to scan, the camera's like, wait a minute, there's another bathroom here. Now I'm really confused. So it's super important to mark the mirrors as you go to tell the software that this is just a reflection. There really isn't something behind this mirror. Just ignore everything from that point on. Hey, Luke, how are you? Nice to see you. All right, are there any questions that you have for Isabel or I? Let's see all these questions we're gonna get. Hi, Lenny. It's a little bit earlier today, so I don't know how many people are joining us at this time.
I do have an off-topic question that Robbie Manny was asking me about yesterday, and I didn't have the answer. So Oculus Go, a lot of people are trying to bring Oculus Go's to events or to visit potential clients. And so there's currently no way to add any other space that's already not in the gallery. You can only navigate to them using embedding them on a web page and going to that web page. Is this something that will change in the somewhat near future?
So currently the Oculus Go is not supported. I don't believe it's on the roadmap at this point, not in the near future anyway. In order to use the Oculus Go, you do have to be using the web VR browser. You can't use the VR app. So yeah, there are limitations on that. We are aware of that people would like it to be supported, and certainly when time and resources permit, I'm sure that will happen. But as of right now, not in the near future.
All righty.
Should we trim as we go?
Yes,
Yes.
definitely.
You
Especially mirrors.
you can always trim after the fact, but if you don't trim as you go, like I said, when you get to the location behind that mirror, the camera's going to get confused. So yes, it's always best to trim as you go, also because it's hard to go back and remember where all the mirrors are, and a lot of times people have mirrors all over the place, like in the bedroom, and you won't remember, right? It's harder to remember. So mark windows, mirrors, whatever you need to mark as you're scanning. I think that's a best practice.
So mirror-like surfaces. I was scanning a art exhibition the day before yesterday, and so there was a glass wall that was slightly reflective. And so first I marked it as a window, then I trimmed it, and I marked it as a mirror. And it seemed that marking it as a mirror was best because it was dark, so the main hall was reflected in this glassy window. So sometimes you have to experiment. And then there were also glass cases where there was pottery and jewelry. And the glass cases were about the height of my height. And so at first I trimmed them as windows, but that was not good because that created a wall that went all the way up and down the floor. And so I had to remove those. So sometimes, depending on the situation you're in, you have to experiment with trimming it in different ways. But in general, if it's reflective, the mirror marker is a good bet.
Yeah. Be careful too, because when you mark a window, for example, sometimes you have a window on a second floor, but it's like open to below, so there's no floor. If you mark that window, the marking goes all the way until it hits some kind of flooring, and if there's no floor there, it goes all the way down to the bottom floor. And so if that window is above a door, a lot of times you'll get a wall of mesh right across that door. In that case, you can't mark that window above. So remember that markings, window markings especially, look for the floor, and they continue and they just keep going down until they hit some kind of floor.
How close do the windows, the markings have to be? What's the tolerance? That's a good question from Stephen.
Yeah. So I did talk to the engineer, and he said that they will move the window markings 40 centimeters one way, front, back, or the other way. So it's a total of 80 centimeters leeway that they can move them, depending on the situation and how they feel it's best placed. So a lot of times window markings are tricky because you think you've got them in the right place and the software will move them. In that case, just kind of try and move them around a bit and see what happens. I normally find that if you move them closer in, it helps rather than having them further out away from the house.
Me too. I err on the side of inside the house.
Yeah, it seems to work better. Sometimes I see spray outside a wall with no windows. Do I have to trim that off for a better dollhouse? Yeah, so if you see spray on the in the mini map in the Capture app, that normally means that if you haven't trimmed the window or the mirror correctly, you will get spray there. it doesn't hurt to add a trim just in case. Processing does take a long time, so it's kind of a pain if you missed it and you have to go back and reprocess. So yeah, add a trim. I think it's safe. Some people trim all the way around. Like if you have a house, they'll trim all the way around it. And that's just to be safe. You can do that too.
Question from Scott Stewart. Should we use trim on top of mirror splash? I am not sure what that means, but where there's a mirror, it's really important to trim, like err on the side of trimming more versus less, because any kind of reflectiveness can make the model freak out and misbehave. And question from Christopher about stairways. I usually start on the bottom and work up because I find it easier to move the tripod upwards versus downward. You don't want the tripod getting away from you when the camera is, not stable. But I don't think the processing software cares, right, Dee?
Correct. Correct. You can scan and from the top to the bottom, from the bottom to the top. It doesn't matter. Just remember that when you start a new floor, that first scan has to be right next to the last scan you did. Okay, because the software will only align the first scan on each floor to the last scan you did. So don't start a new floor and then head all the way to the other side of the house.
And also, when you start a new floor, make sure that you name it. So I once created a new floor, I started scanning, and then I came back from lunch and it was like, oh my God, Dee, my whole floor is gone. I scanned a whole floor and now there's nothing. It was because I didn't name the floor. And so the floor appeared as a blank line on the floor indicator. So yes, it was like 100 scans are all gone. Capture ate my work.
Did you delete the name by accident? So it was like blank?
Yeah, it was blank. Oh. I don't know why it did that, but yes, floors need names.
Yeah, having a blank name I could see would be a problem. When trimming, where is the best place to out the trim for the best dollhouse? Closer in to the house, middle of the wall. Oh, when you're trimming around the like a house, you don't need to trim actually on the wall. Move it out a little bit. Trim marks do get moved back as well, 40 centimeters. So you don't. So be careful of that. So if you have spray, make sure you're within 40 centimeters of that. But yeah, you don't need to put it right on the wall. I put it just outside the perimeter of the home.
From Peter, when I scan a large hotel, I find small objects and move them around in the rooms to make them look different. Yes, that is a wonderful thing to do. So when you're doing hotels or apartments or offices, usually there are many, many, many rooms and they all look exactly the same and they're furnished the same. And this makes capture very unhappy. So when you're doing room 50, suddenly it thinks that you're in room 25, even though it's 100 feet away, and you're like, no. So yep. The solution to this is to move objects like plants and books and tables and chairs around so that capture understands that, hey, this space is different from the last one.
Yeah. That's what we lovingly call arbor tags, which are trees, plants, anything you can move around to make one space, one area look different from the other. Remember, it's using visual cues. So.
Question from James. When you scan both inside and outside, well, either with the BLK and also with the Matterport, or even when you're doing an interior window where you're scanning both sides, do you mark the windows on both sides or with one side? So I experiment with this, and I think I like it best to trim on both sides, because when you trim on one side, then when you walk past the window, there are more glitches. So I think trimming on both sides offers a smoother experience, but I think Dee disapproves.
Yeah, so I would say don't Don't trim on both sides, because trimming windows on both sides in opposite directions of each other will they'll eat each other. So just trim on one side. It doesn't matter which side, just pick one and just do one. So I've seen instances where people have done the marking windows on both sides, and it eats up the mesh and it doesn't work.
Really? Oh, it
Yeah.
didn't happen to me. But okay, if there's a danger of that, then don't do
Yeah. So
that.
I just tell people, just mark on one side, either side. It doesn't matter.
Oh, and also if you don't trim at all, then people will be able to walk through the windows. So you may or may not want that. Oh, and that's a good question from Kelly. So people are complaining that the photos, both 2D and 360s, are not working in matter tags anymore.
Yeah.
And so, what is the preferred content host now that does work with matter
Yeah.
tags?
So recently, Imager and Flickr have changed stuff on their end, which means that some of the people who were hosting on their sites, their matter tags aren't working. In that case, it does work if you use Google, upload it to Google Photos. You could do that. I believe Imager is now fixed. You can test that, but I'm not sure. It's either one, Imager or Flickr. I'm not sure which one, but one of them is now fixed. So yeah, the unfortunate part is when you add something in a matter tag, we're sort of dependent on the third party not making any changes, because we just pass the information to them, and then however they decide to render it is how it happens. But when they make changes, it's not in our control. So if something like that does happen, yeah, Google Photos seems to work pretty well.
What about 360 photos? I used to use a Momento 360, and yesterday Tristan Davies said that it didn't work for him anymore, and I tried. So it renders in Workshop, but when you publish it and look at the actual model, it just shows you like a black box.
Uh-oh. I had not heard that. So Momento 360 is no longer working, because that was my third party of choice. So, good question. I'll have to I'll have to find out what we can tell people to use, because I haven't heard that. So thank you for letting me know that. I'll find that out and let you guys know.
Hey,
Yes,
thank you.
Imager is Imager.
Imager, whatever.
Whatever. Oh, so Bjorn said that Momento 360 worked fine yesterday. I don't know. Can somebody test that and see if it's working now?
Maybe it was just a glitch when I tried it, hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully, because I really like it. All right, what other questions do we have?
Question from Keith: is the stand location determined by the infrared or by the actual imagery? Like when it's aligning, does it depend on just the 3D data or also the photographic data?
So when you do a scan, it's taking both images and it's getting 3D data, and it uses both, I believe, to do alignment. But it is looking at visual cues. I know that I've seen it where they put the two photographs together and they try to map points that are the same. So yeah, both, I think.
Chris Frazier wants to know, what about landings? What about them? Like which floor do they go on? It doesn't matter which floor they go on, because when it processes, it ignores what floor you put them on anyway.
Yeah. So yeah, the processing engine takes the floor designations that you use in Capture and completely ignores them and creates its own floor designations based on the height of scans. The only reason why you need to use different floors in Capture is so that all your scans aren't stuck on top of each other. So if you have multiple stories, you want to separate them out so you can tell which scans are on which floor. Also markings go by the floor designations that you put in Capture. So that's important.
Question from Peter: if you scan high and low, does it improve the point cloud? If you have a space where the ceiling is really high, both the Matterport and BLK only have a certain height range. So if the ceiling height exceeds the scan height, then yes, putting it on a higher tripod does improve the point cloud, because otherwise you will not be capturing what's up there. In scanning low, sometimes there's blank spots under shelves or furniture. So if you want a complete point cloud, then people do go under things.
Yeah.
So it depends on your goal. If you want a perfectly square dollhouse that has the perfect shape, then it does pay to scan high and low. And people often just turn those scans off in the tour so that you don't get this weird experience of, oh, wow,
Right.
10 feet in the air.
Turning them off, you mean hiding them?
Right? Yes, hiding them.
Yeah. Oh, so we have some information. Momento 360 is no longer working, but Kula works. Kuula. Awesome. Thanks for the information, guys. So Peter asks, is the density the same or do you get more points? Well, so the more you scan, the more data you're going to get. If you scan higher and you get more mesh, then yes, you'll get more points.
But I don't think the overall density changes. It's just the coverage. So if you didn't scan near a ceiling, it would be completely blank there. There would be a 0 point cloud. And if you do scan it, then the density would be the same as near the ground. Yeah. So I think you can make it more complete, but can you make it more dense? Because Matterport just outputs it at a certain density.
Correct, right. We actually give you a less dense version than what we collect, but that's all that's available for right now.
Is there any plans to release the more dense version? I know that people have often asked for it. Yes?
Not that I'm aware of, but that doesn't mean no. So somebody asked, what's the distance for April tags? 15 feet on center. Because remember, the camera can see about 5 to 8 feet. So if you put them every 15 feet, it should be able to see from one to the next. All right. Sometimes I get a low overlap warning even when the scans are close to each other. All right. When you get a low overlap warning, you can ignore that. It's just a warning. For most of the time, it should be fine. Don't go more than 5 to 8 feet from one scan to the next. Because that will cause alignment issues. And if the camera says, hey, I can't align, don't ignore that. Just say, okay, I'm going to delete this scan and I'm going to try doing it over again. So John asked the question. John's question is, he's trying to place the ends of his markers. Well, it depends on what kind of marker it is. If you have trim markings, I usually like to overlap them a little bit where they intersect, just to make sure that there's no hole, so that some mesh can't escape through the hole. And trim markings I try to place as accurately as I can. Remember, on the iPad, you can use 2 fingers and spread them open to zoom. So if you have fat fingers or whatever, you can do that, and then you can place them more accurately. But yes, it's very important to place them as accurately as you can. Oh my goodness. The little feet on the markers. Do you know what little feet? I don't know. I'll talk to you later, John, because I don't know what you're asking. Luke says, I have a question about the floor plan. Can you please tell me if Matterport will... Where'd it go? It just disappeared.
Oh, well, Matterport allow us to order the floor plan when we upload the space. Because now the workflow is you have to wait till it's done, and sometimes it's done at 4 in the morning, and then you have the client calling you at 6 saying, did you order the floor plan? And you're like, oh my gosh, I lost 2 hours. So if you can order them at the same time.
So you can't. The reason why is because we use the OBJ in order to create floor plans, and until it's finished processing, we don't have that data. So I am so sorry, Luke, because I know you order a lot of floor plans and it would be really nice. But maybe one day we'll put the ability to ask for it, and then they'll just like get it when it's done or something like that. But yeah, I'll let our product team know that's something that you would like, for sure. Okay, so we have an answer to the feet. He's
So
talking
they
about the little.
overlap. Like when you do a corner, so do the feet need to do the ends need to cross?
So if you're marking trim, mark them mark them longer than they need to be so that you have intersection. If you're marking windows, then yes, the beginning and the end where the little markers are, those are the beginning and the end, and you should get them as accurate as you can. However, you can go slightly over on a window because what it just will fill in the mesh along that wall. So I have some people who will mark an entire wall as a window because it fills in that wall in case there's some 3D data that's missing. So if you overmark a window, that's just fine. I do that all the time.
So a question about re-uploading. Currently, it creates a new model so that you lose all your snapshots and matter tags and whatnot. And so will there ever be the ability to add scans into a project that's already live?
Yeah,
Probably
sorry,
not.
unfortunately no. It's kind of like somebody told me like baking a cake. I mean, once you have the cake, all the ingredients have been baked in and you can't go in and now add like an egg, right? So yeah, so there are certain instances where we can copy the information from workshop, and that is if you just add 360 views and re-upload, if you just add trim marks, or when any kind of marking and you re-upload, then we can copy the work you did in workshop to the new space. But if you add scans or if we move scans around for you, then unfortunately we can't, and you have to redo the work you did in workshop. So look at your scan, look at your space before you start working in workshop to make sure that it's correct and it's exactly what you want. There's no misalignments. So take some time to walk around, check it out before you start putting in a lot of time adding snapshots, matter tags, whatever, because that can hurt a lot if you have to redo a lot of that work.
I want to go back a little to a question by Sherry and some discussion with Chris Frazier. So when you're going through a hallway and the door has to be closed for you to get through, but you want to get into your room, you have this open and closed door situation. And sometimes people do the Justin Bond trim marker thing with trim lines on both to get rid of the mesh caused by the door. And there's a weird glitch when you go through because there's no mesh when you cross. So what are the best practices to deal with the open and closed door situation?
All right. So if you want to do that, remember that trim marks get moved back 40 centimeters. So you have to scan at least 1.5 feet, and I always tell people 2 feet away from any closed door or any open door where you see the door. So if you want to remove the 3D data from a door, make sure you're at least 2 feet from that door. So what I also tell people to do is scan 2 feet on either side of a door with it open, right? Then you can scan all your other scans with that door closed. And all you need to do is put trim markings, make a little diamond around those 2 scans that see the door open, that are on either side of the door, and the software will only use those 2 scans to create the 3D data within that box. All right. All the other scans will be ignored. So if all the other scans see the door is closed, it doesn't matter.
All right, that's helpful. I didn't know that. John Hover wants to have undo and capture.
Yeah, we have that as a feature request, John. Thank you. When you have a hallway where doors open to each other and it is too narrow, yeah, there are a lot of situations where you have like doors that open into each other and you can't open them all at the same time. The best way to get around that is take the doors off the hinges. If you can't do that, then you do have to play around with it. And if you know sort of how you're going to trim to remove the doors, you can sort of think ahead to where you want to scan. But remember, always scan 1.5 to 2 feet away from any door if you want to be able to trim that mesh from that door. So even if you have an open door, you don't want to be right against that open door. Right?
Here's a tough one from Jorn. Is that how you pronounce your name? I'm sorry if I got it wrong. So scanning a large outdoor area and the scans are way off, and also the capture is misnumbering them. So it is hard to find the last scan. So the last scan is always a darker color.
Yeah, so scanning
So
outside is hard because the camera uses the infrared sensors to collect the 3D data. And of course, if it's sunny out, the infrared from the sun is going to interfere with the camera. So it's not going to be able to get 3D data. And so you run a higher risk of things being placed in the wrong location when you're scanning outside. You have to be super vigilant to make sure that it's placing it in the right location. And if it just won't work, it means it's too sunny out. You should come back later during civil twilight, which is either first thing in the morning or last thing at night, before the sun has come up or after the sun has gone down, but you can still see outside. I've seen people scan in pitch dark, and our camera works really well in the dark. I've seen them do scans that are further than 8 feet apart. It just works better, and it creates this sort of like, it's kind of like a romantic feeling. It's sort of darkish, but you can still see, and it's really kind of cool. So experiment with that when you're scanning outside. But yes, please be careful, because you are more likely than not going to get some type of misalignment. All righty. Well, it looks like we're out of time for right now. I'm so sorry. We will try and answer your questions offline as well. But again, thank you so much to everybody for joining. Thank you, my lovely cohort in crime, Isabel, for all the time that you spend, and all the time as well that you spend on MOUG answering everybody's questions. Remember, next week we will take the week off so you guys can go to Inman and enjoy that. And we will be back the week after that at 9 o'clock Pacific time. Until then, happy scanning. Bye.